morning, everyone. I'm your host, Shashi, again with you all with one more new episode on our Global Women Dialogue talk show to create more voice for women and by women. As we always try to create our knowledge and create our motivation by bringing our unique and experienced speaker. In the same way, in today's our episode, our guest is connecting with us from Switzerland, Anna. Anna, she is a Swiss architect, urbanist, and musician. She did her Doctor of Design in Urbanism from Howard University. She is passionate about designing with aligning with nature and Mother Earth, not going against with it, and going beyond her anthropocentric view of the world to include all living organisms in a balanced development. A part of that, she's an author. She writes a lot of articles, so she published her book and many papers. We will hear from her about her work, about her passion, how she's bringing nature and Mother Earth with her work as well. So welcome Anna on our Global Women Dialogue talk show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shashi. Thank you so much for inviting me onto this talk show to share my work and experiences. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing for us and for women and for women's empowerment and inspiration. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Anna. I'm aware that your work schedule, your work is quite intensive and busy, but finding time from that and being part of this talk show where you are creating inspiration and motivation for our audience, for our listeners. So thanks a lot for finding time for our talk show. Let's move ahead and knowing about Anna. Who is she?
Thank you for this lovely introduction that you already made. So I am born in Switzerland, and my father and the heritage from my father's side is I come from a mountain village in the Valais, a beautiful place in Switzerland, 1,500 meters, which also has sources of warm, healing waters. And my ancestors were mountaineers and mountain guides. And we were very blessed through my father and family to have this connection to nature. Also, a good friend of my father's and my family was a naturalist, Robert Renard, who did art, paintings, and gravures, spent a lot of time in nature. He's very well known here. He was maybe one of the first ecologists. He wrote books about ecology. So when we were young, we used to go to his workshop and see his work. So I think somehow, I guess I was kind of really integrated, also connected to nature through my family as well.
Yeah.
My father was also a sailor, so we sailed, and I had this connection to the water and the sea. So part of my work is also on blue urbanism and sea. And in Qatar, where I also lived for many years, I worked for many years with my students on a turtle conservation project. So how does
Right.
design and urbanism, how important it is for biodiversity and nature conservation. And then from my mother's side, my mother is from Berlin, and I visited first in 1987, and my grandmother was there at the time. And then 1989, I was there when the Berlin Wall fell. And that's where my work on borders, I would say, began, because my architect's diploma was a project for the Berlin Wall. My master's was looking at divided cities and looking how the Berlin Wall developed. And then my PhD was on the Cyprus buffer zone, and then expanded to look at the Korean demilitarized zone and other borders in these conflict areas. And the idea is really looking at the opportunities and the sort of ecological development. Somehow while these buffer zones and conflict zones are extracted from human development, they're
Right.
actually invested by nature, and nature has an opportunity to restore and regenerate itself in these spaces. So
Yeah.
my work was really building on this kind of opportunity and this positive evolution in a very
Yeah.
negative space. And sort of
Yeah.
the work is how to build a beautiful scar in these areas of rupture
Mm-hmm.
and in these
Right.
ruptured communities and also landscapes. So it's really bringing the communities and landscapes together. And maybe there I can cite one of my books, as you mentioned. It's called The Social Ecologies of Border Landscapes. It's an edited
Mm-hmm.
book, but it's really bringing together, the social, the communities and the people and the ecologies in these border landscapes to create new ecological futures. And
Mm-hmm.
another one was in Cyprus, on the Cyprus buffer zone, called Stitching the Buffer Zone. And my
Mm-hmm.
chapter is From a Deep Wound to a Beautiful Scar. So,
Nice.
so this is part of my work, and also, really related to nature and ecology, and also to endangered species. In these buffer zones, there's also a lot of endangered species which can find their landscapes and
Yes.
territories and
Right.
ecosystems again.
Yeah.
So it's also about building on this opportunity. And so
Mm-hmm.
considering not just humans, but also all species. And,
Yeah.
we can even go to looking at, microorganisms, because today we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about obviously viruses, but they're all part of our ecosystem.
Yeah.
And our ecosystem biome, our gut biome, everything is all connected. So,
Right.
so we really have to take care of all of these scales.
So, Anna, that's very beautiful introduction and very beautiful way the way you are sharing about your work. That how nature, ecology, and urbanist architecture you are bringing and your work together. And I can see this very beautiful background. It seems like some places. Would you like to talk about it? What is it all about?
Behind me is a picture, a photograph I took in the Korean demilitarized zone. So, as you may know that Korea was divided during the Korean War,
Mhm.
and still is divided by this buffer zone between North
Yeah.
Korea and South Korea.
Right.
And so I've been going to Korea. It was actually one of the case studies I looked at when I was working on my PhD, and I've also been going to Korea for many years,
Mm-hmm.
sort of presenting my ideas and also my ideas for the Cyprus buffer zone, also how they could be related to the Korean demilitarized zone.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been visiting many times. The last time was actually just before when the pandemic was started. It was at the Pyeongchang Peace Forum.
Mm-hmm.
This is really interesting, is because it's actually a legacy of the Olympic Games that were held in Pyeongchang. And this is actually another subject I worked on with my students, was sort of the legacies of these mega events. And it was very
Mm-hmm.
interesting when I was in Qatar, because
Mm-hmm.
as you know, the FIFA World Cup is coming up. So as soon
Mm-hmm.
as I arrived and started teaching, part of my teaching was really saying, what are the future legacies of
Right.
this FIFA World Cup, and what is the future legacy it will leave in Qatar? So the
Right.
legacy of the Pyeongchang Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
there's been really this idea of a peace legacy. So that the Peace Forum was a sort of continuation and legacy of the Olympics, because during these
Right.
Olympics, there was actually one team, a female team of North and South Koreans. So this idea that the Olympics, can
Mm.
also be a symbol of peace. And it also
Right.
happened in Germany. There was, I can't remember the exact date, but it was there was a team from East and West Germany
Mm.
that participated. So this kind of seems impossible in the conflict.
Right.
So this forum is sort of continuing this peace legacy. And actually, I'm actually working at the moment with the organization, the International Federation, Women's Federation for
Mm-hmm.
Peace, World Peace. and UN Women in Geneva. And so we're working on the sort of co-designing and co-creating a space for women in the demilitarized zone. The idea of having sort of a landscape garden, something that will emerge and will also be co-created, obviously involving women from the north and the south. It's obviously really
Right.
important to have people from both sides.
Yeah.
And there are a few organizations, including the Women's International Federation for World Peace and some organizations in Korea, women's organizations, who've actually had meetings with women from North Korea. So there's already a precedent. And the idea is now how we could bring this idea together. And it would also be the seeds for maybe a larger, the idea of creating a larger, the idea has been that creating a fifth UN office in the DMZ
Mhm.
because there are no UN offices in this region of the world. And our proposal is saying, yes, but what is the UN today? What are nation states today? And also this idea that it would be seeded from a place for women and that it would also look at a more inclusive, nature-based and
Mhm.
also maybe less patriarchal different systems. So it's also a whole reflection on what
Mhm.
new spaces we can create and also what new forms of governance or world governance. So
Right.
we're working on this project together. So it's bringing the
Uh,
ecology,
yeah.
governance and peace together and the
Yeah, that
environment.
the way when you are talking about the bringing ecology and world peace together, and how you are creating this at same time, bringing women and human and ecology perspective with nature, aligning with nature, and bringing peace in their work and in their demilitarization zones, as you mentioned. So, Anna, when we are talking about creating peace, especially through these sports or through this legacy in sort of way, uh, did you find it was sometimes stressful because initially, because many countries do this kind of, as I remember many times, India, Pakistan, they also do some kind of games, cricket especially, and they try to do these peaceful movements. So
Yes.
how you find when we are talking about creating a legacy or peace restoration or all these kind of work, because sometimes it's really stressful. So how you find that?
Stressful. Yes, I think it's not always easy. And I think yes, I think it's really important to, to listen to everybody, to know the context, to
Yeah.
use the right vocabulary. I've learned that from experience.
Mhm.
Um, in certain places, words are very sensitive, even spaces. I work a lot with maps and cartographies.
Yeah.
And whether it's in Cyprus, as you said, in India, Kashmir, or in Korea, and even in Qatar, because I worked on borders in Qatar. Actually, I was working on the Hawa Islands. I'm not sure if you know, but there was a border dispute between Qatar and Bahrain on the Hawa Islands,
Mhm.
and it actually went to the International Court of Justice in La Hague.
Mhm.
It was the only conflict in the region, in the Gulf region.
Right.
And then finally, the Hawa Islands were attributed to Bahrain. So the border pass is actually very, very close to Qatar.
Mhm.
So being interested in borders and, arriving in Qatar, I obviously
Mhm.
started to investigate also this question. And obviously at that time, it was very important to define the borders because of obviously
Mhm.
the exploitation of oil and gas. You have to fix the
Right.
borders to know where you can, which is yours and which is, the other countries.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it was very interesting, first of all, to discover that for me, and then also to work with my students and research on actually this idea, because the idea in behind my work is also creating these transboundary conservation areas, and the Hawa Islands is a very unique area for conservation with endangered species such as dugongs, hawksbill turtles, dolphins, etc. So, and what's interesting is on the other side in Qatar, you have what's being proposed as a UNESCO biosphere reserve. It's the Al Reem Biosphere Reserve.
Yeah.
So on both sides, you have the potential, in fact, of making this transboundary protected area in the water and on the land. So there's really this opportunity. So that was how I brought this work also to Qatar. And to say,
Mhm.
as you were saying, the stress, I remember because I presented also some of my work in I traveled to Iran as well, and many times. And it's always very complex because the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Gulf, as you know,
Yeah.
it's very it's very touchy whichever you use wherever you are. So
Right.
the solution I had was to use the Gulf, Khalij, the Khalij. But of course, that doesn't really, satisfy everybody. So
Yeah.
sometimes in the talks, I'd get a little piece of paper saying it's the Persian Gulf, not just the Gulf. So yes, there is. I mean, there's always tensions. Obviously, there's
Right.
always tensions. So the thing
Yeah.
is to anticipate, and also then not to overreact or to react, and just to take all of that as part of the process, and things that
Yeah.
have to be addressed to move forward. I mean, all these tensions are
Mm-hmm.
really the tensions that are there, and then the idea is how can we actually go beyond them. And sometimes what I found is this idea of not working under the radar, but not always expliciting everything. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when I'm talking about the future visions and the peace, you don't always talk about the whole conflict and bring it all up again. And so it doesn't mean I
Right.
don't know about it, because I've done a lot of in my PhD about geopolitics and what's going on in the ground and etc.
Right.
But then when I'm there, I'm not interested in just talking about the whole past, etc., but really
Right.
moving to the future, but knowing the
Yeah.
past, being in the
Yeah. It
present.
it it bring you a more solid foundation to what to avoid and what how you can form your talk and
Ex-
work. Yeah.
yes, exactly. That's the thing, but not bringing it up because you don't want to
Yes.
bring that conflict up again. You want to
Right.
try and shift. The
Yeah.
idea is really shifting
Yeah.
the mindset, shifting the energy to
Exactly.
looking at a new possible
Right.
future. We don't need
Yeah.
to stay in that
Yeah.
same.
When we many times we say we are flaring up those issues or we are suppressing them down. So it's kind of the way
Yes.
how you have to
Yes.
take those approaches. Yeah.
And it's not ignoring them, but
Yeah.
I
Right.
think it's also very personally in our own personal lives. We could see the
Yeah.
same thing,
Yeah.
probably.
Right.
And it's true that this work on borders, I always felt it's as much a work on my inner self than on these
Mhm.
huge external borders. So it's an interesting uh,
Yeah.
journey, actually.
Yeah, I think that way I totally agree that how you can not only personal in the professional in personal level also how we try to take those moments where we feel uplifted rather than those negative or dull moments we are flaring up and getting into again those kind of dull zones. So
Yes.
it applies in our professional life as well. So Anna, when we were talking about you said you worked for some eco restorations and this turtle preservation conservations and all in Qatar as well. And same time we are aware that Qatar economy is very much based on the oil and gas
Mhm.
exploration and so in terms of nature ecology and mother nature, the balancing factor, how you find it. Maybe you have experienced through your research or work, or what way do you see in present time or in future? Because we are experiencing a lot of climate change, which
Mhm.
is very much evident everywhere. And when it comes on these country where we know these are totally dependent on oil and gas, and they are as a deserted, but they are trying to bring more nature, more greenery in different ways. How you see their future? How what way you are finding that?
Well, I am an eternal optimist, because I think it's important, to always, there are always solutions, and there's always a bright future if we are ready to transform and change also ourselves and the way
Yeah.
we are relating to Mother Earth and to nature. When
Mm-hmm.
I was in Qatar, I do first want to, salute the work of Sheikh Moza, Her Highness Sheikh Moza, in
Mm-hmm.
creating, the Qatar National Research Fund,
Yeah.
Hamad bin Khalifa University, and this idea that she has of transitioning really to a knowledge economy, saying, okay, we have the oil and gas, but, we have to think beyond that.
Yeah.
And also, obviously, the work of when I arrived at Qatar University, Sheikh Al
Mm-hmm.
Misnad was the president, and there's also her daughter Sheikh Masa, who's working on, who's also managing all the culture and museums. So it was very
Mm-hmm.
inspiring to see, to come
Right.
into this culture where the women were really driving education, culture, arts, social,
Yeah.
etc. All that was the
Mm-hmm.
social development.
Mm-hmm.
So I must say, I really I see that there's been really this strong desire, and
Yeah.
also really also pushed by
Mm-hmm.
the women in leadership in
Yeah.
Qatar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when I was in Qatar, I was teaching mainly the undergraduates in architecture, mainly women. I had mixed classes in the masters. So very quickly, I worked on projects and took the students to
Mm-hmm.
visit the mangroves, to visit the turtle
Yes.
beaches, to visit abandoned quarries, to really go and see the land, and then to see what needs to be done, what can be
Right.
done to
Mm-hmm.
restore, to
Mm-hmm.
regenerate. So one of the words I like
Right.
to use a lot, yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's sustainable urbanism, green urbanism, but I think it's really regenerative urbanism, and I would say that's really our task, is to restore and regenerate
Right.
what's already there. So, and I see it's really the young generations. It's really important because they understand as well. I mean, they,
Yeah.
a lot of them didn't really know Qatar actually very well, because they don't necessarily, go out very much of the city,
Enter.
etc. However, we also worked with an environmental NGO, Friends of the Environment, which is led by Dr. Saif Al Hajri, and he was an incredible support for my work at Qatar
Mm-hmm.
University. Because it wasn't always easy. As I like working in borders, well, I was a bit at the border also of the discipline of architecture, because I was going towards biodiversity, nature, landscape. And for me, it's
Right.
essential, because it's
Mm-hmm.
essential that we
Mm-hmm.
bring all this into architecture. We can't just make buildings and objects that we stick into the middle of the
Exactly.
landscape, and
Right.
then, use up all this energy and have no relationship
Right.
to the environment. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I answered your question. I don't want to talk too much, but maybe I'll stop there, and you can you can.
No, no, that makes totally sense because as we are seeing, why I put this question, because as you are urbanist architecture, as well as you align your work with Mother Nature and nature. So I thought let's see how we can see that. But as you answered that, how you worked, how it is helping, and what way they are, the coming generation and young generation seeing the their own places, and how they are understanding this conservation and restoration and all. So
Mhm.
moving ahead, and I was talking about um, you as a who is passionate about women empowerment as well. So when we are talking about peace, building up women empowerment and bringing women through peace and these kind of work, how you see these kind of work and how you align with these kind of work, would you like to share something?
Um, your question is the women's empowerment and related to my work. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that through the teaching, for me, teaching is obviously transmitting some
Yeah.
knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and also, techniques, strategies, tools. But
Mm-hmm.
it's always been also about empowering the women. And also for me, the students, especially the women students, I would say, I'm not just training you to go and fit into a slot in an office or an administration, but really to see what needs to be done and to bring it to the authorities. And we
Mm-hmm.
actually, with the Turtle Project in Qatar, with the help of Dr. Saif Al Hajri and Friends of Friends of the Environment, we managed to present this project to the Public Works, the director of the Public Works, the president of Ashgal. And then it was also, there was another project actually, which was Abu Nakhla Reservoir. We designed a whole project with the students to save Abu Nakhla Reservoir. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
know this reservoir where there's a lot of birds and nature. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
reservoir that's made with treated sewage effluent. And I became
Mm-hmm.
fascinated because it's a huge lake in the middle of Qatar. And,
Right.
you wonder, well, where did this lake come
Yeah,
from?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we actually, designed a project for kind of an ecological space,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be also be able to be visited, etc. And we'd have all this wildlife. There's a lot of migratory birds.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a chance that we got to present it to the president of Ashgal, and also finally, I wrote even a letter to Her Highness Sheikh Moza saying we really need to save this wetland.
Mm-hmm.
And we also, then the Minister of Environment, the Minister of Planning, Municipality and Planning, also called us, and we presented it also to him. That was a few years after. And we had based this project on the High Line in New York, which is an extraordinary landscape that was built on this disused railway. And
Mm-hmm.
that was a bottoms up project that started with the Friends of the High Line. So
Mm-hmm.
with the students, we decided to say, we're going to create Friends of Abu Nakhla. And I showed them the whole process of this bottoms up initiative that then became a project of the city. So the
Right.
idea was for the students to see that you can also bring ideas, and that
Right.
it's important that you see what needs to be done to bring to the authorities and not wait, because of course we know institutions, etc., sometimes takes time, for
Yeah.
all of this to come to the right person.
Right.
So for
Mm-hmm.
me, that's one form of empowerment and women's empowerment, and really to take the lead as well, not just to wait, and be given the ideas and the work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I just need to decline this. And so that's sort of one approach. Another was, of course, I inspired my students to also open their own architecture offices. There aren't many in
Wow.
Qatar. I
Mm-hmm.
know there's one or two women. And another was, we were very fortunate in Qatar during the time I was there, that all the great architects, visited, because they had work there in stadiums, Jean Nouvel, Rem Koolhaas, and I was
Right.
also blessed to meet Zaha Hadid before she sadly passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And when I met her, I asked her, will you take one of my students into your office? And she agreed.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to visit her in London. And so one of my students went to train with Zahadid. So it's also really, thinking big, being out of your comfort zone.
Right.
Also, sometimes I would put them out of their comfort zone. I would also be a little bit out of the comfort zone because I'm trying new things with them. But I'd
Right.
say that's sometimes where
Yeah.
you learn the most, and you have to
Indeed.
start feeling comfortable being out of the comfort zone, because that's where
Yeah.
you push your boundaries. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, I think I'm not sure if you want more examples, but
No, no,
that's
that's great, and I think I can relate many things when you're talking about the through work and through coming out of comfort zone, and how you are creating these, putting those leadership example and giving them those sense of that how they can lead in their future life or in their in current work or whatever place they are, and when you're talking about comfort zone, I remember when I started coming in front of camera and talking and recording, it was always like, even everything, it's some sort of way it creates you like little comfortableness, like, okay, yeah, I know this is my thing, this is the script, this is the all, but it's still you feel so much and nervous.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, but as you said correctly, that coming out from your comfort zone always give you lots of learning and great learning, and I feel whatever way I'm today, maybe it's one of the good example you are quoting, coming out from your comfort zone. uh, Talking about as a current situation is a global pandemic, and restoration, conservation, aligning with our work, aligning our work with nature and Mother Earth, how you see it is right time, and it is essential to make people understand that now it's the right time to take action accordingly.
Yes, I think despite obviously the great negative effects of this pandemic, and the loss of lives, and also economically, it's a great hardship. On the other
Mm-hmm.
hand, there is this acceleration of certain, there's more digital collaboration, and so it really expands these opportunities for collaboration across the world and connection. Even the speed at which we can do things, or just, the way the vaccines have been developed, there's been a lot of collaboration worldwide and sharing of
Right.
data, etc. But I think it's also brought awareness to many people about, I think, personal health as well, the
Mm-hmm.
importance of personal health. And, there's been sort of these interruptions of supply chains. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of made people think about, smaller structures, smaller communities, this whole thing about, growing your own food, because,
Right.
having smaller spaces, community
Mm-hmm.
based. And it's something that I've been thinking about before the pandemic. Even one project, which I could explain a bit more about later, was at Qatar University, where we were looking at Qatar University as a living laboratory for the food,
Mm-hmm.
water, energy nexus. And with my
Mm-hmm.
students, we actually planted, permaculture gardens. So this was
Mm-hmm.
planting food on the campus and also enhancing biodiversity. So it's really both of these, bringing both of these to the university campus. And one of the ideas was that, instead of always having these very big infrastructures, whether it's for treating water or creating
Mm-hmm.
energy or etc., is to really scale down and have smaller structures more on site, so you create more resilience. And then you're
Right.
also creating these communities. The project we had for the university was really
Right.
a multi-stakeholder one. We actually created a garden, and I've published about this with our students, a permaculture garden.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was also to involve the Nepali workers and the maids. There's a lot of people on the campus who spend their days there and have a lot of time. And we noticed when we planted the garden that on the roof, the Nepali gardeners started, there was a space for gardening which had never been used. They created a
Right.
roof space. And there was some areas where you could plant things, but no one had ever planted. So, my idea was to start planting, but they'd already started planting things. And what was interesting is a lot of these workers actually come from rural communities. So there's all this know-how. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we give them, these spaces like community gardens
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
involve them, and also the Nepali and all the communities. So the idea was that all the communities on the university campus could have community gardens. So on the
Right.
one hand, during the times that they have off, they can, cultivate the gardens. We use permaculture, so we
Mm-hmm.
promote biodiversity. We
Right.
reuse water. We can reuse the water from the air conditioning on the roof. So
Right.
we actually have water we can reuse. And they can also grow crops that they grow normally, and eat where they are. So also it's healthier for them, because obviously,
Mm-hmm.
they have low incomes and probably, don't have a very varied
Yeah.
diet, etc.
Right.
So we already had this idea kind of for the campus, this living lab for the food, water, energy, and really involving all the communities,
Yeah.
from the
Mm-hmm.
researchers, the students, the workers, everybody, to create
Right.
this. And I
Mm-hmm.
think around the world, this idea of, having more community gardens, looking more at our health. And another factor that was very important was soil. And that's when we use permaculture, because we've, especially as architects and urbanists even, and people, we've become a bit disconnected from soil, which is very,
Mm-hmm.
very important.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, a lot of theories, we see that the soil biome and the microorganisms and our gut biomes are very closely linked. And the gut biome is very closely linked to the immunity system. So if we look at it very holistically, we can see that our immunity systems, our soil systems, our ecosystems, everything is really interconnected. And I think maybe this kind of pandemic, in a way, has opened up to more of this holistic thinking about a
Mm-hmm.
healthy environment, which goes from
Right.
our inner body to our outer landscapes and
Mm-hmm.
communities.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think the way you reconnected back to the immunity and holistic approach, it's really wonderful, because uh, I think this is the time we have to understand, coming out from our own way to having this fast mechanism life and are from our silos to get connect with our wholesome as we utilize our holistic approach for our health, but as well as with community as having these community gardens or all these kind of approaches. Moving ahead, Dr. Anna, you are creating some sort of leaders by your work, and as you are creating some sort of leadership example with your work. So, how you define your leadership qualities?
Oh, well, thank you for that question, because I've never been asked that before.
No, actually, I also as an educator. So I believe when we are with students or whether we are in our day-to-day life, we are trying to, educate, and it's sort of leadership. So as you
Yeah.
are creating with your students and giving them opportunity and creating day-to-day life your own example as a leader. So how you define it?
Yeah. Well, actually, it reminds me of a phrase that I heard Her Highness Sheikh Moza use, which is leading by example.
Mhm.
So I think
Wonderful.
that is, I think that's important, is it's, to walk the walk and walk the talk. And, uh, if we think Gandhi, be the change you want to see,
Right,
be the peace you want to see.
right.
So I think in a way as sort of embodying the values that you are trying to transmit. So I think that's important, I would say. And I think I think first I also think it's important to have joy and passion. I really think that's really important. And I do. I mean, the projects I've done with my students and the work I do is a great passion and a joy, and something I feel inhabited by. So I think that's really important also, that for the leadership. And I think, yes, it's sort of the being authentic, to yourself and others. And it's a journey, because I guess we're always discovering ourselves and discovering others, and and the co-creation, and really learning, or just learning from our mistakes, because we're not perfect, and every experience has a learning in it. So not to be discouraged, but to see every step as part of the experience and the learning, and say, okay, how can I move, do better next time, and also I had to myself also sort of talk to myself and say, well, perfection doesn't exist. Of course, we that's what we want to attain, but it doesn't exist, because it can be very, it can block you as well if you're too
Right,
much of a perfectionist.
right,
And I think at the beginning I was, I really like things well done and beautiful and well organized,
right.
and so I had to sort of accept that whatever it is, it's what you can do in the moment, and then you will do
Mhm.
better. And that actually it's important to do and to realize, and then to move on. Otherwise, if you don't actually do or create anything, you can't really move on. So I think it's
Right,
also being compassionate with others, but also with yourself, and seeing life as a journey, and an evolutionary journey.
yeah,
And so I think that's important as well.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome. And when we are talking about all our leadership qualities, bringing our the compassionate, and as well as our focus for our self and as well as community development, how the way would you like to give to your message to our audience or our viewers who are listening and watching us?
Well, I think that, yeah, the message would be to really to co-create. I think that's what also today we're being, that we really hear, to create with each other.
Mm,
And so also find the places and the things that give you the joy. I think it's important that we bring this good energy into what we do, and we find the communities
mhm,
uh, with whom we really want to create and co-create our visions for the future.
mhm,
And I think it's important to, also to have this positive vision of the future to say, well, there's always something to be done. And however small or however large, there's always ways we can help, we can move forward, we can create. And it can be in our life, in our daily life, there can be small gestures and we can be working on big projects. But I think, and I think the work you're doing is fantastic. I mean, I think it's a blessing to be invited today to be interviewed by you and to see all these communities, especially a lot more communities of women and empowerment, and I think it's very inspiring. So I think to connect together and to reach out and to share and to even ask for advice and assistance. I mean, this is also advice I'm giving myself, but maybe ask, when we don't know everything,
Yeah.
but creating new platforms, new collaborations, new co-creations. And
Right.
sometimes we're out of our comfort zone, but it's also the strength
Mm-hmm.
in everybody's knowledge that comes together that builds up a very strong web, I think. So how we
Yeah.
can really build this strength as a community together.
Yeah, yeah, that's so beautiful. And thank you. Thanks a lot for having such kind of impression and feeling and faith for this platform and this Global Women Dialogue Talk Show. Anna, it was beautiful talk. And just would like to ask if any audience or any viewers would like to reach out to you, maybe they would like to look and get connected related to your work or some kind of support, how they can reach out to you.
Well, maybe the easiest would be to look at my website. It's annagrishting.com. And you can contact me through the website, or there's an email, anna@annagrishting.com. So it's quite easy. I don't know if you want to, I can paste it
Yes,
afterwards if
yeah,
you
we
have
will
it
put it in description as well. So
in the
thank you.
description.
Thanks a
And
lot, Anna.
maybe
Yeah.
if I could just mention very quickly also,
Yes.
because I'm also a musician and with my late
Wow. We
husband,
missed that. We missed
Shale.
that.
Yeah, so I just really wanted, because my late husband, he passed away 2 years ago, but he's still very much in my inspiration. And we created Desert Bridges in Qatar in 2013 for the opening of the Swiss embassy, and we did a concert in the National Theatre. We played also with some Qatari musicians, Syrians, Indian musicians, Swiss and American jazz musicians. And so that was also really this bridging, Desert Bridges it's called. So it's really about bridging cultures through music. So I also kind of work on this bridging through music, and I'm really excited because we have another project coming up in the end of August in the region. So it's going to be launched next week, so I can't say too much because the organizers are going to have an official launching, but I'll put it
Right.
also on my social media. So I'm on Instagram, Anna Katerina G. I can put those in the link, and also I'm on LinkedIn. So I will also share that. So the Desert
Yeah,
Bridges,
that would be exciting.
it's
Yeah.
this
And
connection
we
to
will keep eye on that, that you're launching and the music and all. It's all together new aspect and new knowledge for me, and I would be happy and excited to share as well. So thank you, Anna, for sharing all your
Thank
wisdom
you.
and knowledge and experience. Thanks a lot for being with us, and thanks to all our audience and our listeners who are listening and watching us. As you have heard from Anna, how she is creating with her work changes in their life, in the community. Same way we are here to inspire and motivate you to bring change in your own life and create motivation for others. If you are looking for get connected with Anna, we are going to put her details in the description as well. Get connected with her and look for what kind of support and work related you would like to get connect. So with this note, that's it for today's episode. I will come back with one more episode with more motivation, more inspiration. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.